Welcome to StaalX Construction and Steel Podcast. Episode 20. U.S. construction costs are surging. Worst could still be ahead. Big news from StaalX. StaalX Next is launching soon. The invitation-only steel marketplace where you can sell both prime and secondary materials. Reach new buyers, move excess inventory, and stay in control, even anonymously. StaalX Next, the future of steel trading. Now, let's get into the market.
You know, it's funny. Usually when you decide to renovate your kitchen, or like you see a new housing development going up at the end of your street, there's this expectation of local control.
Right, totally. You think it's all just contained right there in your town.
Exactly. You think the timeline and the costs just come down to, well, the builder, the local lumberyard, and maybe the weather.
We really do tend to operate under that assumption, that our immediate day-to-day economic bubble is just insulated from the rest of the world.
Very insulated. I mean, you get a quote, you sign a contract, and the wood gets delivered. But then you look at the raw data hitting the U.S. economy right now, and that local bubble just completely pops.
Yeah, it bursts pretty quickly.
Have you noticed how a geopolitical conflict thousands of miles away in Iran is suddenly threatening your neighborhood's new housing development? Or driving up the cost of your home renovation?
It is wild. The reality is that the concrete poured in your driveway is, it's anything but local. We are looking at an absolute masterclass in how global supply chains trigger a massive domino effect.
Right, every sector is basically bleeding into the next. So today, we're going to do a deep dive into how the recent conflict with Iran is creating these massive, invisible shockwaves across U.S. markets.
Specifically targeting construction, real estate, and the hidden logistics bottlenecks driving it all.
Right. And we've got a fantastic stack of sources for this deep dive today. We are pulling from an Associated Builders and Contractors report, or ABC via CCE Online News.
We also have this really eye-opening CNBC analysis of the U.S. housing market by Diana Olick.
Yes, and a StaalX steel market report that completely reframes how we think about moving materials. And just a quick note for you listening, we're covering some sensitive geopolitical stuff today, but our mission is strictly to report on the economic impacts outlined in these sources.
Exactly. We are not taking political sides here, just unpacking the data provided in these reports to see how the dots connect.
Our goal for this quick deep dive is to untangle how surging global energy prices, the sudden pivot in the U.S. housing market, and trucking capacity are intimately linked.
So let's jump right into the raw data on construction costs, because the ABC report makes it incredibly clear that the Iran conflict basically poured fuel on a fire that was already burning.
Right, the engine was already redlining. Like, just in February alone, construction input prices rose 1.3%.
And, standing alone, 1.3% might not sound like a crisis to the average person, but you really have to look at the velocity of that increase.
Well, totally.
If you carry that momentum forward, it pushes the annualized rate for early 2026 to a staggering 12.6%.
Wow.
Yeah. And if you isolate non-residential construction inputs, those climbed 3.7% year over year.
The individual commodity jumps since February 2025 are just wild to look at. Like, natural gas is up 30%.
30%, yeah.
Copper wire and cable up 27.1%. Iron and steel are up 15.3%. And when you zoom out to the macro picture, overall construction inputs are up 45.3% since February 2020.
That is a massive jump. But the underlying structural pressure driving those numbers isn't just basic supply and demand. Trade policy is playing a really massive role here, too.
Right, the tariffs.
Exactly. Ken Simonson, who is the chief economist at the Associated General Contractors of America, he points out this critical dynamic regarding tariffs. Import duties on metals are effectively creating what economists call a price umbrella.
A price umbrella. So basically, because imported materials are slapped with these steep tariffs, they become artificially expensive for U.S. buyers.
Right, exactly.
And that means domestic suppliers don't really have to compete on price anymore. They have the runway to just raise their own prices across the board, stopping just short of that inflated import cost.
That is the exact mechanism. Domestic producers increase their margins simply because the tariff allows them to. But here is the crucial detail about the ABC data we are discussing.
Okay, what's that?
All of these double-digit commodity spikes actually predate the February 28th conflict with Iran.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
They predate it?
Yes. So this is what things look like before the conflict even started.
That is crazy. That is like looking at a weather radar that shows a massive storm hitting us, but then realizing the radar image is a month old.
Yeah.
And an even bigger hurricane just made landfall yesterday, because now we have oil spiraling toward $100 a barrel due to the conflict.
Right, which changes everything. Anirban Basu, the ABC chief economist, is explicitly warning that this alarming pre-conflict data is a floor, not a ceiling.
A floor. Wow.
The 45% baseline jump since 2020 was literally just the starting line before global energy markets panicked.
So while major publicly funded infrastructure projects might be able to absorb these incoming cost shocks because they have, committed federal dollars and decade-long timelines.
Yeah, they're insulated.
Right. But other sectors do not have that luxury at all, which brings us to the most vulnerable sector. If the massive federal projects are insulated, the people left holding the bag are everyday home builders and ultimately everyday home buyers.
Absolutely. And the CNBC analysis really puts this into perspective. It shows how the war and the resulting inflation fears have just instantly derailed the U.S. housing recovery we were all expecting in 2026.
Yeah, because right before the strikes in the Middle East, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate was sitting at 5.99%. There was a genuine sense of relief in the market.
Right. Buyers were finally coming off the sidelines.
But those rates are now hovering around 6.5%, and mortgage applications dropped 5% in just a single week.
To put that jump into perspective, moving from 5.9 to 6.5% is an increase of roughly 50 basis points.
Which doesn't sound like a lot.
It sounds minuscule on paper.
Yeah.
In finance, a basis point is just 1/100%. But in the context of a 30-year mortgage on a $500,000 home, those 50 basis points add hundreds of dollars to a monthly payment.
Oh, absolutely.
It completely alters a buyer's debt-to-income ratio, effectively disqualifying thousands of people from loans they were approved for literally just days prior.
And you see that shift immediately in Zillow's forecasting models. Misha Fisher, Zillow's chief economist, initially predicted a solid 4.3% sales gain for this year. They were calling it a reset year for the housing market.
A reset year, yeah, that was the hope.
Now, that entire forecast is held hostage by the geopolitical timeline.
The math changes drastically depending on how long the overseas conflict lasts. Fisher's updated model shows that if the situation resolves by April, the home sales gain shrinks to 3.48%.
Okay.
If it stretches into September, that drops to 1.21%. And if rates stay just 50 basis points higher while unemployment ticks up even slightly, the anticipated gain vanishes entirely.
Wow.
We would be looking at a 0.73% decline in sales.
You can physically see the panic setting in on both the builder side and the buyer side. Like KB Home just had to lower its full-year forecast.
Yeah, I saw that.
On their earnings call, their chairman, Jeff Mezger, explicitly cited the Middle East conflict and poor first-quarter orders. Buyers are simply walking away.
Right. Redfin data shows 13.7% of homes under contract in February were canceled. That is the highest cancellation rate since 2017.
Buyers are exercising whatever leverage they have left, and statistically, they suddenly have the upper hand. There are over 600,000 more sellers than buyers right now, which is a near-record gap in the modern market.
It is a massive gap.
But wait, I have to challenge this dynamic for a second. If sellers outnumber buyers by 600,000 and buyers are canceling contracts at the highest rate in years, the basic laws of economics say builders should slash prices to clear their inventory.
You would think so, right?
Yeah. Why is KB Home just lowering their sales forecasts instead of having a massive price cut event to just meet the market?
Because builders are completely caught in a vice. They cannot slash prices to entice buyers because their input costs, which we saw in the ABC report, are astronomically high.
Oh, right.
They would be selling homes at a huge loss.
Yeah.
But to understand why those input costs are so stubbornly expensive right now, we really have to look past the physical materials themselves.
Because if the materials themselves aren't the sole culprit, something must be holding the delivery of those materials hostage. We have to be looking at the trucks moving them.
Exactly. This is where the StaalX steel market report completely shifts the perspective. The real crisis dictating prices isn't a lack of physical steel or lumber.
It's getting it there.
It is a severe breakdown in logistics and transportation capacity.
And the diesel shock is the smoking gun here, isn't it? Following the strikes in Iran, diesel fuel jumped from under $3.90 to a national average of $5.16 per gallon.
That fuel spike acted as the primary catalyst for a total unraveling of the freight market. The StaalX report highlights tender rejection rates for flatbeds.
And for you listening, a tender rejection rate measures how often trucking companies turn down contracted loads they previously agreed to haul.
Right. And that rate just surged to over 41%.
Over 41%. The report notes that is a pandemic-era level of disruption. Carriers are literally tearing up their contracts because they're chasing spot market loads instead.
Yeah, and to explain the spot market really quickly, that is the open market, where shippers who are desperate to move goods right now will pay massive premiums.
Right.
When fuel costs spike as violently as they just did, trucking companies cannot afford to run on the tight margins they agreed to a week prior.
Makes sense.
A contract paying $2 a mile is a massive loss when diesel is over $5. So dispatchers reject the contracted load and take a spot market load paying $4 a mile just to survive.
But it isn't just the price of fuel pushing drivers to the brink. There is an intense regulatory pressure shrinking the actual number of trucks on the road.
Yes.
The StaalX report mentions the federal implementation of something called Delilah's Law, which has tightened commercial driver's license or CDL issuances for non-domiciled drivers.
And again, just objectively reporting what the source says here, Delilah's Law essentially places strict residency and documentation requirements on drivers who do not permanently reside in the state or country where they are operating.
So overnight, this mandate pulled a massive percentage of legal drivers out of the driver's seat.
Exactly. So you have a simultaneous shock. Fewer drivers legally able to operate, and the ones who still can are rejecting standard contracts because diesel is just too expensive.
It is a severe supply-side capacity crunch. So the steel itself isn't the whole problem. It is getting it from point A to point B. It's like buying a heavy, top-of-the-line refrigerator on clearance.
Yeah, great deal.
But then finding out the delivery fee is 3 times the cost of the fridge itself. And worse, the driver might just cancel on you halfway to your house to take a better offer.
That is the perfect analogy. The delivery mechanism is entirely dictating the market price of the goods. And this is why the pricing trend for industrial materials remains incredibly bullish, even when consumer demand feels shaky.
Right. Nucor just raised their hot-rolled coil, or HRC, prices by $10 to $1,025 per short ton.
And HRC is trading at a rare premium over rebar, which is a really fascinating indicator of how warped the supply chain has become right now.
Tell me more about that, because that reverses the usual trend we see in flat versus long product spreads, right?
It does. To break that down for the listener, long products like rebar are the backbone of structural construction. They go to concrete foundations.
Right.
Flat products like HRC go into manufacturing appliances, cars, and roofing. Usually rebar drives the market volume, but right now, flat steel is commanding the premium.
And you might think, well, if domestic HRC is over $1,000 a ton, just import cheaper steel from overseas. But you can't.
You absolutely cannot, because the logistics trap applies to the oceans too. Imports are too costly, precisely because ocean freight and inland transportation costs are surging in tandem.
Every avenue for relief is blocked by transportation costs.
Yes.
So what does this all mean for the near future? The StaalX report warns of a looming threat they are calling a consumption collapse.
Yeah, there is a growing, palpable fear that market demand will just buckle under the weight of these record-high delivered prices combined with a cooling construction sector.
Builders can't lower prices because their inputs are sky-high. Buyers can't afford the higher mortgage rates, and the materials themselves can't move cheaply because of diesel and driver shortages.
The entire system just freezes.
According to the report, the only thing really keeping the commercial steel market buoyant right now, preventing a total freefall, is the massive boom in data center construction.
Which makes sense. Those tech giants have the capital to absorb the costs that residential builders simply can't.
Data centers are acting as the solitary shock absorber for the industrial materials sector.
They really are.
So let's synthesize this through line, because it is a fascinating, if somewhat terrifying, domino effect. A geopolitical conflict in Iran spiked global energy and oil prices.
Right, sir.
That immediate spike triggered a logistics nightmare, sending diesel over $5 a gallon and causing skyrocketing transportation costs while drivers vanished due to new regulations. Those transportation costs, combined with import tariffs, forced U.S. builders to absorb massive input hikes. And because builders cannot eat those costs, they raise home prices and cut their sale forecasts, which, when combined with 6.5% mortgage rates, ultimately crushes affordability for the everyday homebuyer.
It illustrates perfectly how sticky inflation actually is.
Mm-hmm.
It is not just one number on a spreadsheet.
No, not at all.
Whether you are looking to buy your first house, or you are just planning a small renovation, or you are simply wondering why the broader economy feels so incredibly tense right now, these hidden supply chain mechanics are the invisible forces shaping your wallet. You cannot separate local housing from global logistics.
You really can't. The driveway is connected to the ocean freight, which is connected to the diesel pump. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a new angle to ponder, building on that detail we just mentioned about data centers. We established that the massive boom in data center construction is practically the only thing currently keeping the commercial steel market afloat. But there is a hard physical boundary to how many data centers we can build. The U.S. power grid is already hitting its absolute capacity limits.
Right. I mean, you can build all the server farms you want, but if there isn't enough electricity to turn them on, the construction abruptly stops.
Exactly. So here is the provocative question to take with you. What happens to the entire industrial supply chain when that single pillar of demand is forced to halt because we literally can't plug anything else in?
Oh, wow.
If data centers stop buying steel and home builders are already frozen, does the market just collapse? Is the electrical grid actually the ultimate bottleneck for the entire U.S. economy?
Now that is the real uncharted territory we're heading into.
Something to think about next time you flip a light switch in that newly renovated kitchen.
Thank you for listening. Explore more at www.staalx.com.